My name is Rich Kettner. Welcome to Starry Night Guitars. Today we're going to look at the subject of reading music on guitar and how important is that for you to develop that skill. Well, I think what it comes down to is what it is you desire to do with the guitar. You can be in a rock band, you can be a private teacher, you can become a band director, you can do work in recording studios, and a wide variety of other stuff. What I've found in my own experiences is if you want to play for a living, I think it's really valuable to learn to read. If you want to do the kind of gigs, society gigs, or certainly if you want to do studio work. Just to give you a quick example from my life. I'd been in the Marine Band, and I guess two examples for you. One that shows the importance of needing to read, where I failed horribly, and the other one where after learning to read, it was a tremendous asset. So for me, while in the Marine Corps, I was in the Marine Band as a trumpet player. I had an opportunity to do the musical West Side Story and be in the pit orchestra. And I wasn't getting paid for it, it was just the experience. Well, unknown to me, that was one of the hardest books to play. And it became quickly evident I didn't know how to read music. I knew the notes, like in the first 3 frets from Mel Bay Book 1. And after I learned that as a teenager, once I got the bar chords, I moved to rock and roll, and that was the end of that. So I didn't really work on reading. Well, I got into this West Side Story project and limped through as best I could, but realized I really need to read. Because at that point, I decided I wanted to go to college and be a professional guitar player. So for the next year and a half, I really worked hard on my guitar reading skills. And then I got to college, originally as a jazz guitar major. I then switched to education, but I had an opportunity to play in a show band, like a 15-piece show band. It had horn section, singers, rhythm section. And this band did not rehearse. It was like a bar band where you rehearse every week and then you do a gig together. This was all reading music. And there really was no audition. The audition was this. I showed up for an actual gig in my tuxedo with my guitar and amp. I get into this convention hall. This was in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm on stage and we're in front of a couple thousand people. And I was handed this book about this fat of music. And the guy leading the band just calls out a number, 52. And I'm flipping frantically through the book to get to song 52. And I barely just get the book open. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. The tune starts in front of thousands of people. So the expectation was you could just glance at that once and read it down and play. Now, fortunately for me, as I said, I had worked for the last year and a half. After my humiliating experience with West Side Story, I worked on reading. And I was able to do that, and I got that gig because of my reading skills. And so what I found out, all those kind of gigs, show gigs, or what are called society gigs, it's expected you can read. I mean, it really is essential, because there were friends with me in college who played better than me, could certainly solo better than I could, or had better rhythm chops even, but couldn't read at all. And what I see is very common among guitar players, at least it was when I was coming up. Maybe not as common now. I think it still probably is very often, I think guitar players are at a disadvantage. At least guitarists, say, within commercial music settings or in jazz settings. Because if you're in a jazz band, say in college, the trumpet players, trombone players, sax players, almost certainly all of them have been in music education or have been in band programs, like since elementary school. Probably elementary band, middle school band, high school band. All that time they were learning the fundamentals. They were reading music. Where most guitar players, or a lot of them, I would say the majority probably start in rock music, or playing by ear and just figuring things out. Or someone shows us a couple chords, and we kind of go from there. So when guitar players learn to read, very often they're kind of behind the 8 ball. They have a lot of catching up to do to read as well as a horn player. So I can just say that for me, if I couldn't read music, I wouldn't have got that gig. And there were a lot of other gigs, the same situation. It's just assumed you can read. And if you want to do studio work, again, it's important that you can get in there and hear a tune and create a part, but also reading is essential, because depending on the project, you may come in and there's a whole chart written out. And besides even reading chord symbols, sometimes it's actual just notation, stacked chords, where instead of it says C and you're playing this, C9, it's actually the notes written out and you're supposed to be able to read that. So studio work is essential. Now, as a rock player, not as important. And not to be disparaging to rock players. I've known friends that were brilliant rock players. I played with a buddy now about 30 years ago, greatest rock player I've ever played with. He could hear a tune once and play it. Couldn't read anything. He couldn't even read chord charts. He struggled with that. But he could hear things and play it. So a lot of rock players in that kind of style of music, reading is not a necessary skill. So my takeaway would be, I would encourage students to learn to read. If you think of it as, I want to make myself as marketable as possible as a guitar player. If I'm just a rock player or a blues player, if I'm thinking of like wedges of the pie, if I can be a great soloist but I can't read, this is what I can do. It's a pretty narrow window. Now, you may be great at that. But over here at studio jobs, or these commercial jobs, or teaching in a school setting, you're going to miss out on all that. That's a lot of stuff you can't do. Whereas if you can read, it might get your foot in the door and give you the opportunity. So I've heard some people say, oh, reading music or music theory squelches your creativity and your soul and spirit. I think that's a bunch of hogwash. I tend to hear that from people who can't read music and use it, or don't understand theory and use it as an excuse. A lot of brilliant rock guitar players, they still understand a good bit of theory. They may not be able to call it by the correct name, but when they hear it, they understand what it is, and they know how to apply it and how to play over that. It's just essential. It's like being literate. There's a thing as being musically literate. It's an important skill to develop. Now, if you're just a hobbyist and you just want to strum chords or play on the weekend or just play for fun, then that's your call. Maybe it won't be beneficial. But if you want to do it as a career, I think it's a very important skill to develop. So just to throw out one book, the book that I used to learn to read, and I believe it's still available, is called For Guitar Players Only by a guitarist named Tommy Tedesco. Last name is Tedesco. He was like the #1 studio guitar player in Los Angeles in probably the 60s and 70s. He was like on every theme song, the theme songs to TV shows, commercials, movies, soundtracks, everything that could be done in the studio. He was on all of them. He could play anything. Amazing guitar player. And he had this book For Guitar Players Only that showed you I believe, a very logical approach to how to learn to sight read. And it kind of equates to learning the keyboard. When I was in high school, there weren't computers. Computers were just starting. Personal computers did not exist. They were big computers with massive terminals. So there was typing. And I didn't take typing in high school, but my understanding is you have like a home place where your fingers rest, and then up a row where here's this key or that key. You have to learn where they are. So you can read something as you type rather than watching your fingers and saying, T, N, right? He did the same thing on guitar. For instance, on the first string is E, 12th fret is E. He would show you an exercise with all the notes in between, and then an exercise of random notes just jumping up and down. But you saying the note name. He did that on all 6 strings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the part that was really powerful was then learning to play in position, meaning if I put my first finger on my 6th string 1st fret, that's first position. And I'm going to cover the first 4 frets. Index finger on the 1st fret, middle finger 2nd fret, 3rd finger 3rd fret, 4th finger 4th fret. So in first position, I know if I'm reading music, the lowest note I can play is a low F, and the highest note I can play is 2 octaves higher, A flat. So this exercise, he would just have a row of notes, random, no key signature, all the possible notes in that position. And at first, it sounds very weird in like 12-tone music because there's not a key. Point is, you can train your brain to know exactly what notes I can play in this position, or third position, or fifth, all the way up the neck. And I worked through that for a good 6 months, probably an hour or two every day. And when I got to the point where I could look at a piece of music and really look for the highest note and the lowest note and say, oh, I can read all that in fifth position. And the cool thing is, I could then sit here and play it. And not have to look at my hand. Because once I glanced up the neck and try to look back at music, I would invariably get lost. But if I know exactly fifth position, here's an A, here's a C, and all the notes in between, I know what I can find without having to look at it. If I just do those drills remotely, rotely, over and over and over again. And it was a great book. So now there are probably a dozen different ways to do it. And everyone is different. So you might get that book and you may not benefit from it. But I thought it was a great book for me. It helped a ton. Because once I learned to read from that, I then went to violin books, clarinet books, or I'd been a trumpet player reading trumpet etudes, just reading anything you can get your hands on, and it really improves your reading. So all that to close this up, I would say, if you want to do guitar as a profession, I would say the more you know, the better. It's almost like over-preparing. And then you probably won't use all that, but in case you do get called upon, you need that one skill. It'd be terrible to get out there and someone thinks because you play well, they assume you can read, and you get into a setting with other pros that can do that, and you can't, and you embarrass yourself. So it can be a hard skill to develop, but it's worth the effort. So I hope this helped out. If anyone has any questions or is interested in guitar lessons, you can send me a message. I do private lessons, do lessons online, and or just have questions about something else that I said that's not clear, or would like to go a little bit deeper with it, I'll be glad to help you out. So enjoy the journey, keep making music. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.